Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Masters Conference virtual webinar series. Our fourth presentation for this series is Remote Collections for Corporate Investigations and eDiscovery Practitioners. Today it is brought to you by Cellebrite Enterprise Solutions. My name is Marla Moore, and I am one of the directors of the Masters Conference and a legal technology consultant. The Masters Conference is a boutique educational forum where a select group of speakers, vendors, and attendees convene to engage in a proactive collaboration on current challenges within the legal space. We'll be getting started with today's program in just a moment, but before we get started, just a few of those pesky housekeeping details. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on the Masters Conference YouTube channel within the next week. We encourage you to ask questions at any time during the presentation by direct messaging questions-the Masters Conference in the chat, and your questions will be answered either during or at the end of the presentation. Content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Questions posed by and opinions offered by the participants for the sole purpose of improving our educational value and does not constitute legal advice. The views expressed by the speaker belong solely to her and do not represent the views or opinions of their organizations. And remember, there are no bad questions. Again, we'll be taking questions throughout the presentation, so please feel free to DM any questions in the chat to questions-the Masters Conference. Now on to our program. I would like to introduce Monica Harris, the product business manager at Cellebrite and a director of the Masters Conference. Monica's focus has been on developing and implementing cross-collaborative initiatives inside and outside of organizations that increase productivity, revenue, and margin. She has extensive experience overseeing the configuration and rollout of enterprise-level litigation technology solutions in the law firms, corporation, and government sectors. She has previously managed high-impact initiatives for clients across multiple eDiscovery verticals, including software training, product development, and marketing. Monica is active in many legal associations and is currently the president of the ACID's DC chapter. She has been a member of the DC Women eDiscovery WE board and actively collaborates with Greater Washington ARMA chapter and the DC Bar and Regional events. Monica?
All right. Thank you, Marla. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone that has joined us today. Welcome to Remote Collections for Corporate Investigators and eDiscovery Practitioners. For the next hour or so, well, let me do a quick sound check. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone see my screen? Yes, I see head nodding. Thank you very much for that. All right, for the next hour, we are going to talk about some industry trends for digital collections and also some industry challenges. And then we're going to hop into a demo of Cellebrite's Endpoint Inspector solution, followed by Q&A. As we go through the slides, there will be some polls. We're looking for your input to find out your thoughts as well. All right, so let's get started with industry trends. So industry trends in digital investigations. 1 in 4 full-time employees are working from home. So I think initially in 2021, when we were talking about collecting remotely, it was a matter of how do we handle it? But now that it's 2022, it's a matter of it's here to stay. And so how do we sustain it? So it's definitely an industry trend that we see. At least half of us, 56% globally, are either have a hybrid of working from home or we're working from home full time. In addition to that, 83% of companies have viable BYOD devices. There used to be a time when you had 2 cell phones on you at all times. And if you wanted to have a work-life balance, you would leave your personal phone at home. Likewise, a lot of us at home do not have work-issued laptops. Some of us are using our own and using VPN to access some of our company resources. 75% of examiners said computers appear frequently in investigations. And so when we say computers, we're talking about data that's exclusive to the computer, as opposed to, let's say, your Outlook or your Teams or your Slack. That's data that is typically found in enterprise cloud. So we are talking about web browsing history, for example, and volatile artifacts, understanding if at one point there was a USB drive connected to your computer. And 95% of all corporate investigations include message and conversation data. Whether we want to call it message data, conversation data, short message data, I actually heard someone earlier this week call it continuous data, right? It's not that it's a short conversation in each chat, it's that it's a continuous conversation. But because a lot of us are working from home, that encourages us to collaborate more, and a lot of that is happening through messaging applications. So let's deep dive into these, starting with the 1 in 4 full-time employees are working from home. Actually, I apologize. Let me go back very quickly and take a look at these 4 industry trends. Marla, can you assist us with the poll, please?
You got it.
Thank you so much. So from everyone that's attending today for the webinar, we wanted to get your thoughts. These are the industry trends that we're predicting for 2022. So we'd like to know what are your thoughts on these trends? Is this what you're seeing in your own job and maybe of your colleagues as well that are at other companies? Or are there any trends that you're seeing that we don't have listed here?
If you don't see any of the trends that are listed here, please put them in the chat.
Thank you for that. Can everyone see the poll?
We've got about 7 people responded.
Fantastic. We'll give you a couple more seconds to do that. Okay, thank you very much for your input. Okay, so let's deep dive into some of those trends, starting with the 1 in 4 full-time employees are working from home. Studies have shown that employees that are working from home are more productive. There are less interruptions in terms of someone stopping by your office, for example, to ask you a question or to do a follow-up. More focused time, quieter work environments, a more comfortable work environment, and then you also have the opportunity to avoid office politics, for example. All of these things lead to greater job satisfaction, even mental wellness. And in addition to that, remote work is the biggest attraction for talent. We are in a job seekers market. And so offering either hybrid work environment or full-time remote work environment is very attractive to attracting top talent right now. Computer data. We talked about that's 75%, and the distinction between cloud enterprise data, which we work quite a lot with in terms of Office 365 or a lot of the messaging apps that we're using, and the actual data that is going to be on your computer. Let's say, for instance, a lot of us have been through security training, right? With a lot of data breaches that are happening. And so usually that's an email that's in your Outlook with an attachment that you download, right? That attachment that you download, that is going to be directly on your computer. That's not, assuming you don't put it on a network location, of course. That's not something that's going to go into the cloud. That's something that we could find with acquisition from your computer. Likewise, or similarly, IP transition. We find often with IP investigations, it's not that someone is emailing outside of the organization that information, but they're connecting an external drive to the computer and they're transitioning data that way. With computer acquisition, we can easily understand if that type of event is taking place. And then, of course, there's always the data that you can find in unallocated space that's on the computer itself as well. For message and conversation data, I think that is just pretty much ingrained into our current work life at the moment. In terms of using it for brainstorming, it used to be we would all huddle together in a conference room. Now you may bring a few folks into a chat room to have a conversation. It could be where you have a side conversation with one of your employees, or if this was an internal meeting, for example, and you had some questions, maybe you would follow up with me via Slack or via Teams for a follow-up question. Generally, we see with chat information that it is immediate and a little bit more clearer when you're trying to resolve challenges or when you're trying to reach someone. If you send someone a message in Outlook and they're in back-to-back meetings, how often have you walked into a meeting and the first thing the person said is, I've been in back-to-back meetings, I haven't had a chance to check my email, as opposed to sending someone a quick Teams message or a quick Slack message that they can also quickly reply to, right? So those speedier responses, those speedy answers, that's more communications that's happening, and that's more productivity within the company itself. And then, of course, bring your own device policies, with employees preferring their own operating system. I know that I have an iPhone, I've had one for 10 years, and I have the ecosystem. So in Android, I could have a learning curve there if we're provided with a different operating system. Likewise, whereas we as consumers may upgrade our phones regularly and consistently, that may not be the case if you're working with an IT department. You may get a phone that's new to you as opposed to the latest model. And in addition to that, BYOD policies generally for companies help them save cost. And because employees are working with phones that they are used to, phones that they're familiar with, phones that have the features that they like, they tend to be more productive. Let's talk about industry challenges, including business disruption, the mix of personal and business technology that we see on some of those BYOD devices, privacy concerns, costly review cycles, and data growing larger. Marla, can you help us with the poll, please?
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, let me share the results from the last poll and then I'll go to the next.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Oh, here we go.
Let's take a look. I'm going to pull that on my screen so that we can see. Oh, this is poll 2. Okay, thank you for that. It looks like it's a tie between the mix of personal and business data and the BYOD devices. All right, very good. So let's dive into some of these challenges that we see as well.
Hold on, let me share the results.
Sure.
So 92% said mix of personal and business data.
Yes, yes. With growing data right behind that, privacy right behind that. That's interesting. That's interesting. I thought that privacy would surely be in the lead. Okay. Starting with the mix of privacy and your BYOD device, or that mix, right? So separating personal data from business can be very difficult, primarily because of those BYOD devices. If you are using your phone, for example, for texting or for calling customers, and then you also have pictures from your child's birthday party, for some reason there's a legal hold or something of that nature, maybe a need to investigate, you don't necessarily want the extraction to have both, your personal data and your business data. You want to be able to separate those, but that has been a challenge for forensics investigations. Then in addition to that, privacy, right, or the security of your data. Whether we are talking about actually securing the data on your device or whether we're talking about securing the data during extraction, right? And we're seeing it's more challenging than ever to maintain that. Then in addition to that, the growing sizes of data, more and more data, because we are home and how we communicate with each other, these collaborative applications that we have, the amount of data is growing that we have the ability to generate. That means that data culling at the time of collection is more important than ever. And of course, if you have the ability to cull these massive amounts of data that enterprises are generating, then that's going to save you when it comes time to review the data, whether that be for a corporate investigation or whether that be for eDiscovery. And last but not least, business disruption. Shipping collection kits to employees and custodians at a time when the Postal Service, I think, is bogged down. There's really quite a lot going on there. The long support calls it could take to walk someone through an extraction. Perhaps there are some individuals on this call who are professionals, experts at acquisition, but the folks that we're collecting from, they usually aren't, and it can be a challenging process to bring someone up to speed. In addition to that, those physical and those full file system acquisitions, they take time. They take time. If you have a phone that it's larger, maybe 512 GB, you're doing a full file system acquisition, depending on the make and model, operating system, a couple of other factors like the platforms that you have on the phone, that could take a significant amount of time that a custodian or employee doesn't have their phone. And if it's BYOD, that could disrupt business. So all of that brings us to Cellebrite's Endpoint Inspector solution, which is a secure, remote, targeted collection system, right? Addressing all of the trends and challenges that we just talked about. So let's take a look at what that looks like. It is a web-based platform, right? So it's not standalone install on your PC. Anyone can access it from the web. We have two workflows, and we'll go through them each. One is for the examiner, and one is for the custodian or the employee. So let's start with the examiner. We talked first about the fact that it is a web-based application. So you will have to sign in and authenticate. From there, you have unified remote collection. You can see in the screenshot that we're looking at here, you have the ability to see who created the collection request, the examiner name. You can see who they created it for. Some information about them, the custodian email, that information is going to be very important. The status, what is happening with the extraction? Has it been run yet? Is it in progress? Was it successful? Was there an error? And if there was an error, what was that? We're talking about targeted collection here. So you can see what data was collected. Was it all of the data that was on the phone? Or were you just looking for SMS, MMS? Or were you just looking for contacts, for example? You can see where that data was sent to after collection, and then any additional notes that you might need for that particular collection, anything that might be helpful for auditing purposes. Here you can see the job setup. It is just as simple as the auditing that you saw on the previous screen. An examiner can come in, an examiner or an admin. There are different roles within the application, different permissions that you can have. Can come in and just enter their name. The output for the collection can go either to a network location or secured FTP. If you would like, you have the ability to add additional security to that with a password. I apologize. There's a bit of noise behind me right now. If you could hear that, I apologize for the intrusion. Also, you have the ability to choose the data that you can collect, and I'll show you that in a moment. Your custodian name and your custodian email. I said previously that the custodian email was important because, I'll show you that in 1 second, you're going to have to send 2 pieces of information to the custodian, and you could do that via email. One of them is a very small install, an agent that they'll have to place on their Windows PC. The other is a token that will give the agent the encrypted information that you have entered here. It tells the agent what to do. Here you have an opportunity to see what you can select when you do targeted collection, whether that's all of the data on the phone, which is an advanced logical acquisition, or whether you would like to choose what you want to collect. From the examiner's point of view, this is the entire job setup. For the custodian, once they receive those two pieces of information, the agent, which will display what you see on the screen here when ran, and the token, which they can enter where it says enter the activation code. From there, they'll have to use the plugin that comes with the phone. So whatever that is, if it's an iPhone, they can plug that into their PC, that will connect. Their phone will be auto-detected, and then they will have some very simple instructions to follow. Endpoint Inspector leverages the collection capability of UFED. So what you see here, these screenshots, is very similar to what you would see if you were running a UFED extraction. Similarly, in terms of timing, how long would it take to perform the collection? Generally, the same amount of time it would take if you were running UFED. The difference is with UFED, you have to be local, and with Endpoint Inspector, you can be completely remote and have the custodian or employee run the collection with consent. Once the collection is started, the employee or the custodian will have an opportunity to view the progress. And we also saw from the examiner's window, they also can observe that same progress. They can see when the collection is ongoing or if there's any issues. When the collection completes successfully, that data is then uploaded to that secure FTP or that network location, which is behind the company's firewall and also secure. And then the collection is complete. And that's it. It's that simple. Secure, remote, targeted collection.
Monica,
Yes, ma'am.
excuse me for the interruption. We do have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned the need to install the software. Does it require admin right on the workstation?
It does require admin rights on the workstation, yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So key takeaways for Cellebrite's Endpoint Inspector. So we've spent some time talking about some of the industry trends, and thank you for your input there. And we've also spent some time talking about the pains, and thank you for your input there as well. For Cellebrite's Endpoint Inspector, you have secure collection for remote employee and custodian data. You have targeted acquisition, so that you do not have to pull a full file system or physical images. You can collect just what you need to address growing data. And in addition to that, you have seamless, fluid, advanced logical collection. There is no need to ship anyone any hardware. There's no need for tech support. An employee or a custodian can simply plug and play. And that wraps our presentation. Are there any questions?
There's another question here. You keep mentioning PC. What if they are on a different platform, iOS or using a tablet?
That's a very good question. So right now, the agent install that we spoke about, that does run on a Windows machine. We're looking forward to having that run on a Mac, having that soon. We expect that to happen sometime this year. Great question.
Okay, what about, okay, we have some more here. What about encrypted messaging apps such as WhatsApp, etc.?
That's a great question. Because this is an advanced logical collection, we do have access to WhatsApp data.
Is this an additional cost to the Cellebrite license? If so, what is the pricing model?
That's an interesting question because there are various Cellebrite licenses. The Endpoint Inspector solution is a separate product. It is not UFED. Whereas UFED has to be local, you need to be physically there, or you need to have the device there so that you can plug it into the PC that you're running UFED for PC on. Endpoint Inspector is a completely different product, so it will require different licensing.
Have you encountered any issues with DLP?
That's a good question. I can circle back on that. Marla, I believe we'll be following up with everyone on the call.
Yes, we can. And I wrote down the person who asked that question.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
We have another one is, can the product be used to collect from the PC and server shares?
That's an excellent question. So on the roadmap for 2022, we do have computer acquisition. That'll be sooner rather than later, actually. So with that, we'll have unified both mobile and computer collection and unified jobs per custodian via the web. That's a great question. Thank you for asking.
I think I got all the questions. You guys were all of a sudden came in fast and furious, which is great. We do have another poll, so don't go anywhere just yet.
Thank you for that, Marla.
And what is the feature that is most valuable in the platform? The web access, targeted collections, remote collections, or security? And we'll give you guys about 30 to 60 seconds.
That looks like a
remote collection so far at 57%.
with targeted second.
Yep.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, everyone, for your input.
No problem. I was curious to see what this one would say.
All right. If there are any additional questions, you could always reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn. In addition to that, if you would like to see a demo of the product, we do have releases that are scheduled very soon, and we would be happy to share some information on that and also have a conversation with you and collect your thoughts. So please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Monica, for your time. Very informative. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Please keep an eye out for the NetMasters Conference next webinar, which will be happening next month in February. And we are going to be looking at doing a couple other ones prior to Legal Week. If you have any questions, please feel free to email myself at marla.mohr, MOHR, at themastersconference.com. Everybody have a great day.
Take care, everyone.